really thrilled today to get a chance to have a conversation with two of the stars of this movie. Let's have it come down. Lawrence Shou and Lisa Liu.
Thank you for being here. When it rains, like nobody shows up, so this is like a meeting goal for us. Thank you.
Maybe just to sort of set the table, you know, this is a project that for you started, was it 7 years ago? Can you talk about what it is about the original story that appeared in the LA Times that resonated so strongly with you for you to hold on to this and work 7 years to bring it to life?
I originally read the script first and then read the article because, you know, you just don't know if when you read an article, it sort of taints how you read a script. And I realized that in our lexicon of filmography, we don't have a story like this for our community. And the fact that it happened really devastated me. And I really related to it because there is so much stigma about mental health in general, let alone in our community. And so there's a lot of non-discussion that happens, and there's a lot of just getting through. And I am born from immigrant parents, and I understand the aggression and the sort of the violent way that a person can be treated because they don't speak the language. And I remember that as a child, and it really resonated with me how important the story was. And it was very difficult getting it off the ground. So it took us, you know, I came on 7 years ago, but, you know, it took them longer to get it financed. You know, we had 16 different financiers.
Wow.
And this is not an expensive movie, so you guys can imagine, you know, how much we needed people to really, and there were people from our community that donated. And I think that they really saw like, okay, this is not gonna be a project where we're gonna gain money, but we're gonna gain something much more important, a legacy, you know, a library, a place in the library, and a legacy of, you know, impact, which is so much more important than money at the end of the day.
Absolutely. This is obviously based on a true story, but, you know, in the adaptation of it, there has to be some dramatization. There is some interpretation of behavior. There is, you know, sort of even a diagnosis in ways that maybe were not brought in that original chronicling of the events. Can you guys talk about just sort of the ways that you knew that you would be sort of fictionalizing it, and for each of you, sort of like how, I mean, truly diagnostic you were about, you know, sort of what she goes through, what he's going through throughout this movie, because you're sort of imagining what he may have been feeling, etc. You know.
I'll just start with saying about the script, because the article is, you know, we can only find out what we could find out, and Frank Shong, who wrote this article that was in the LA Times, was able to investigate by interviewing her friend. And, you know, there was a lot of space that was missing. So we knew that he was a swimmer. We knew that, you know, what the ending was, and we knew a little bit about how he was in school. So it was a little bit of detective work that Marilyn Fu had to do in order to sort this out. And in the end, it kind of is a thriller because you don't really know where it's going. And you really are hoping, as Irene is hoping, that things are going to get better. And I think there was so much misinformation about what she thought, because there was also this lack of advocacy. Mm-hmm. And, you know, this marginalization that we feel and that I grew up with is real, where if you don't speak the language or you don't have the funds or the money or the income, you're not going to have the ability to access healthcare or somebody who's going to translate for you. I mean, even if you do have that money, it's hard to figure it out. There's a lot of red tape. And she was really in the system of, I guess, she was working from a deficit, from a place of deficit. And that was you know, the tragedy, because even though she was there, she was not really understanding fully what was going on, even with her own medical diagnosis, you know, until the doctor said to her, you know, she was hoping that she had a year, but when she said that, she really realized, and she thought of not herself first, but she thought of her son.
Yeah.
And I will leave it to Lawrence, who, you know, had his own way through for how he was able to play this character so beautifully.
It was so good.
Absolutely, you know, exactly like Lucy said, you know, there were things we knew about this character and things we knew about the story, but there was a lot of pieces that were missing. And so for those pieces, it was a process finding that, and to that, I want to give a lot of credit to Marilyn, our amazing screenwriter, for writing this beautiful script. You know, she did obviously a lot of research in her own time that kind of put these pieces together and help us create this story. I also want to give a lot of credit to Eric, because we spent so much time before we started shooting just talking and working through who this person is. And I think something that we really focused on was playing Joe in a way that highlighted the compassion and the love that he had for his mother. That was the central theme we kind of focused on. And we obviously also did a lot of, you know, physical, hands-on research in terms of the schizophrenia, because we wanted that to be true and realistic and grounded, and something that honors the memory of him, and as well as other people who go through schizophrenia. So it was, you know, it was a process. It wasn't just one thing or one, you know, we had to kind of find different elements and put them together. But I really am just so glad for the guidance of Eric, as well as Lucy and all of our producers, because they were so patient with me, and, you know, they answered my questions when I had them, and, you know,
This
they
is
were.
Lawrence's first feature film, so we have to acknowledge how I think all of us as actors know that it's this quality that we have that is inside of us, and we just need to have the opportunity to let it shine. And he did, and he was perfect in every way. So I just am so happy and a very bright future ahead of him.
Thank you so much.
One of the, I mean, you're absolutely right. That is such an empathetic portrayal of both of these people. But there is, I rewatched it this week. What's really precise about it is that, you know, as worrisome as it may be for us to think about a young kid who becomes obsessed with school shooters, it's clear that what his concern is that one will come, not that he will become one, or that he feels necessarily compelled, not that he can manifest that in his behavior in a necessarily healthy way. Can you guys talk about like how you sort of fine-tuned that portrayal so that it was less an issue where certainly there was a degree of a lack of safety, but these are not people who lacked some support and some empathy. It was just that there was no precision maybe in the way that you were talking about to sort of be able to exactly understand what each of them was going through for her to be able to help him.
I think there is so much missed with culture, and I say that in a way, in a positive way, and I say that in a way that is not meaning to separate cultures, but, you know, even though this is a story that happened in San Gabriel Valley, which is not too far from here, it is a story that resonates universally, and I think that there is a sense of, you know, what one thinks and what one hears. And I think that when she's talking to the therapist and says that even though, because he doesn't speak Chinese, like that even though he looks like them, that, you know, don't think that you know us, you don't know our family. And there's a sense of protection that we all feel for each other and for ourselves. And, you know, ultimately Joe was very protective of his mother because of what she went through. And in the reality of what happened was, in which for many of you who haven't read this article, is in 2017, this article was written. This happened only 10 years ago in 2015. So it wasn't that long ago. Both parents were stricken with cancer. It created obviously an incredible amount of anxiety and tension for the son, who then, you know, I mean, you know, schizophrenia, you know, is genetic and it runs in the family, you know, at some point in the family line. And it obviously triggered the schizophrenia. And then the father died very quickly thereafter she went into remission and then it came back. And so there's this sense of urgency and a sense of, I guess, this fear. And I think the terror of what was going on, of like seeing these images and then telling the doctor, and then the doctor showing up at the police station and then saying like, you know, the paranoia and the thought of like, why did you show the pictures, you know, because now he's in trouble, and now, you know, there's just so much going on that's confused that creates this, I guess, the ultimate tragedy which occurred. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Lawrence, can you talk a little bit about that, how you defined it in your head, in your performance?
Absolutely, you know, exactly like Lucy said. I think there was a lot of fear and a lot of misinformation, you know, because in the story, neither of them really understand what the other one's going through, and part of that is because they're keeping secrets, right? They don't want to tell each other what's going on. They're not willing to seek help or ask for help or confide in each other, and I think that ultimately led to even more fear and even more tension, you know, tension and fear where there didn't need to be tension and fear. And it's really unfortunate because it all just became this sort of misunderstanding where they became scared of each other. The son was scared that the mother, you know, maybe she's, you know, someone's out to get her, right? That's kind of what was created in that final scene where, you know, he was trying to protect her. He just wanted to protect her, and she feared him because she didn't know that he was trying to protect her. She thought he was just becoming more violent, and it's you know, it's such a sad thing, and I think it's something that's so relevant today because, you know, there is still so much shame and stigma and refusal to ask for help and refusal to share and communicate. And I think that's missing within our communities, and I hope that this movie can shed some more light on that.
Sure. One of the things that I think the movie really does well, to sort of dig into that a little bit more, is that there is a community that each of them has of support. There's obviously her friends, some of whom are more judgmental or have their sort of presumptions, but she does have a close friend. She has, you know, these and then he's got two friends who, you know, are helping her find him when he runs away. That there is a community there. It's just not that they are able to either see it or they don't feel comfortable accessing it. Can you talk about maybe in the telling of the story, sort of talking about those cultural specificities, but also the fact that, you know, if either of them had been a little more clear-eyed, they might have been able to actually receive some of that help.
I think within that, though, you see there's judgment within the community, that societal
Of course.
judgment, or that, you know, the idea that, you know, people talk about like, oh, my son got into Princeton, you know, he's at the top of the class in the piano, you know, there's all of the things that the accolades that people want to see and I guess present. And then there's the reality of what's going on, which is what kind of social media is doing. Social media is showing the shiniest part of a person's life, but not the reality of what's going on. And so the feeling of being found out is so terrifying. But even when she tries to share with her friend at the party, like, you know, he's seeing a therapist, he's much better, she says, you know, you sound like a foreigner. So there's this kind of like calamity of that sort of, oh, you know, you're either going to be judged or you sound like you're one of them. And so that, I think, then created this isolation for her that
Sure.
then made her, you know, even more sequestered from, you know, society and reaching out, and the fear of asking for help. So she's like, I'm going to do this on my own. And even though she was frail, you know, and obviously dying and physically unable to really, you know, stand up straight even, her willpower and her love for her son was the only thing keeping her alive. You know, I mean, there's just no way to see that kind of strength within somebody who is that ill, you know, and it was for him. So I just feel like there's that imbalance, and I think that we all have lived that at some point in our lives, you know?
Sure, absolutely. Can the two of you talk about, you talked about this was not an expensive movie to make, so I'm sure you didn't have months of rehearsals or things like that. What did the two of you do to sort of develop that parental connection, that kind of invisible thing between a parent and child where, you understand each other or understand each other's idiosyncrasies, so that maybe that it lent an additional level of authenticity to sort of the relationship on screen?
Well, yes, we did not have a lot of time, but I think I am so lucky to have Lucy playing my mother in this movie, because she was a mother to me day one. Even before the camera started rolling, before we were in character, you know, she took, I mean, we shot this in New York. I had been to New York one time when I was a kid, and it was, you know, for like a few days, and I barely remembered it. And so when I was in New York, I was like just completely out of the water, like a fish out of, like I did not know what to expect.
You were shooting in the winter and he was running around in a t-shirt, and I was like, oh my God, you need to get a jacket or a sweatshirt. I just was like, it was sort of like I was unable to fathom why someone from Los Angeles, you know what I mean, was running around and was, I mean, I think you were in a daze, to be honest, right? And I was just nervous for him, you know, because we had a very short shoot time. It was his first acting job, and I was just like, honey, you got, please let me give you a jacket, you know, it was crazy.
Exactly what my mom would have said if she was there. But yeah, I mean, she was there for me. I mean, she took such good care of me and things like that. It just made it easy for me to see her as a mother figure. And when we got into the set, I think it translated, you know, because it was so natural. You know, I didn't think twice about it. I wasn't like, oh my God, this is Lucy Liu. You know, I saw her as, this is my mom, and I'm going to treat her as such.
There's this really powerful moment to me in the movie where he's listening in the morning to like a radio broadcast about a school shooting, and she turns it off, and so she tries to turn music on to sort of do, and he turns the volume up, and you just sort of sit there and you're kind of in the moment, and the scene kind of continues on in a way that I was kind of not expecting, in that it just lets you react to what that is. Can you talk about, I guess, not necessarily maybe that moment, but just the idea of like living in sort of that uncertainty and that anxiety and all that, and how difficult or easy that was to tap into when you have these really interesting but largely unspoken scenes of, you know, emerging conflict between the two of you?
The silence in the film is so important, and I think that she's really trying to witness what is happening to her son, and she's losing him right in front of her. And I think there's she's tethered to this hope that she's wrong, and you know, I think it starts to obviously culminate as she sees things are really not well. She starts to count the pills, like now she's second guessing herself. But I think as we all want to have a sense of hope and a sense of, you know, the glass half full. And I think, you know, instinctually she knows something's wrong, but she wants to believe the therapist. She wants to believe, you know, that she's doing all the right things. She's doing everything that they're telling her to, that she's doing the treatment at the hospital. She's taking him to the therapist. He's even taking Western medicine, which is, you know, so I guess there's really a stigma
Kind of
behind
verboten,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, and then, you know, even at the end, she calls the police. You know, it's just heartbreaking to know that she's trying to do all of the right things and it's still wrong. And I think the silence in that moment is like really trying to, I guess, see that there is something undeniable about what's happening. And the terror of that is when she starts to investigate further, and then she finds the scissors, and you know, like and of course it's like a MacGuffin. She's seeing all the wrong things, but also like if we see it as you are, and watching it, you would think the same thing. Like somebody's gonna get hurt. He's gonna hurt somebody. You know what I mean? And I just like even thinking about it like breaks my heart, because it's something that didn't have to happen, and like we just want to stop her, you know, as an audience member, you just want to stop her, but you also know that it's based on a true story. Like if this was a movie that was written, I think that the audience would reject it. They would be like, this is too extreme. Why did you do that? Like nobody's gonna believe that. And I wish that it was fictionalized.
Can you talk a little bit about what, you obviously talked about the significance and importance of this story being told, much less you telling it. But to what extent was telling a story like this, which is so maybe outside of your usual wheelhouse, why it was something that you felt like you really wanted to throw yourself into as an acting challenge.
I mean, this is actually my wheelhouse. I was put in another house when I started,
Sure.
and I didn't choose that house. They chose it for me. And as actors, we're given the opportunities we're given, and we try to change the roof, the ceilings, the walls, and we're so constricted. And I don't have a house. They keep putting one over me, and I reject it. And this movie is something that is important because this is what acting is. It's about really freeing yourself and being a part of something that is communicating our stories. Storytelling is the oldest form of entertainment, and we are not able to even be in the storytelling mode because we're not even in the circle. And it's so unfortunate that we have to graft something grassroots like this to be able to show it, And I'm so happy that you're here because this movie is to be shared. It's not going to be an economic success, but this is something that this is what I'm going to leave behind, and this is the most important work that I'll have done.
How much did this sort of weigh on you, on each of you, while you were making this? Was this something that, either in relief or by necessity, you were really trying to get away from when you were away from set, or did you sort of live in that space while the movie was being made?
Yeah, I remember, going into this movie, I think the first week before we started shooting, when I was in New York and we were doing rehearsals, I think it was probably the toughest week because there was so much weight on you and you didn't know what to expect. You just knew kind of the expectations and just what it meant to carry this story and this character. And it was really terrifying for me at first, I think, especially this being my first feature film. I just did not know what to think, what to expect. But again, I want to give so much credit to Eric, Lucy, and our amazing cast and crew because they took their time to make me feel comfortable. And Lucy specifically took her time to let me know that it's okay to not constantly be in this headspace, that it's okay to just be yourself. At the end of the day, let it go. Because it is so heavy, and I think at times it can be overwhelming. Not even just as an actor, but as a person. That's a lot to carry with you. And so I'm so grateful because without them, I don't think I would have been able to finish the shoot. Because we only shot for about a month, a little over a month, but in that time, there's so much going on. And so I really listened to them, I believed in them, and they believed in me, and as a result, I was able to hold myself, let go, and to really clear my head and be comfortable with the things and be proud of it as well.
Yeah, I just saw him sort of sitting in the corner. I'm like, oh my God, he's falling down the vortex. I would just say, let's go to craft services. Let's talk, we talked about food. I just think that, as actors, our job is to perform. Our job is to be able to, bring these real life characters, to a shared space. And, you can be here doing this, when the camera's on, but when you're off, you can take your time and go away and have a moment, but don't fall into it, especially for a young person. And it can be really dangerous. And I just didn't want him to think he has to live in that headspace, you are talented, and that's not going to change, if the lights are on or off. You're going to be able to perform whatever age you are. And whatever you're doing, it's not going to lose. You're not going to lose that. You have an art, you have a craft, and you're never going to be able to lose that. Even when we don't work in between big jobs or any jobs at all, we still have it in us. We just start to lose our confidence because we are not able to express it, and that's why expression is so important. It's a human form that keeps us alive.
Sure. As tragic as this story is, I really do feel like you come away from this movie as the story of one woman, as complicated as it is, the ultimate expression of love for a mother, from a mother to her son. How did you ensure that when people came out of this, that they weren't just demoralized or sad, but also really feeling that that this person had poured every ounce of her effort into doing this for her son because she loved him and she wanted to protect him, and which I think like helps the story transcend at the end.
I mean, I think that everyone takes away their own personal story within the story, and that's not something that, you know, I could ever control, and I don't want to. Like, that's, you know, it's always going to be, it's art, and art is going to be subjective. I just wanted to make sure that this woman wasn't seen as a monster, that she came from a place of great compassion. I wanted the audience to have compassion for her, and if they changed their mind at the end, they could. But to see that, you know, she was trying and doing her best at what she, you know, given the grieving and the loss and the continued loss and the loss of life that was about to happen for her. I think the headlines, you know, for the article were very clickbait, like woman buys gun, you know, mother buys gun, you know, shoots her son. It's not what happened. You know, if you want to just break it down to those headlines, you can. But the reality is there's so much more behind that and between the lines. And we don't see that often. You know, we see so much that isn't real. We see so much that is not true. And like, I can only bring as much truth as I could to this woman that I believed it was doing it out of love. And I can leave everything else, you know, on the table, because that's not up to me in the end. But I wanted to make sure that it was, I guess, as authentic as possible. It resonated with me because of my family, the way that my parents spoke, the way that people spoke to them, you know. And you know, people ask me oftentimes, like, you think about your son? I didn't think about my son at all. I thought about myself as a child, you know, and that's where I came from, and I drew from that because I know what it's like to, I don't know, see that kind of, I guess, verbal, you know, aggression, and I just felt sad for my family. I felt sad for my parents, and I knew how smart they were and how well-spoken they were, but when they were talking outside of the home, it did sound, you know, I guess perplexing, and I guess it was easy for people to make fun of them. It hurts my heart to think about it. It doesn't ever go away, and I can never give that back to them, you know. But I think that, like, people were trying to take away their dignity. So sorry. But they were so smart, and they, you know, came to create a life for themselves, and their intelligence was not taken into account because of what they look like, and we are not just that. Mm-hmm. And I think that, you know, we have dealt with that all our lives, and there's been a great deal of racism and unspoken pain that we've had to endure, and I wanted her to have, you know, to rest in peace, because she should not be vilified for what she did without having anyone helping her or advocating for her. And I think that I brought my parents into that because they did not have that for themselves.
Well, you do such an extraordinary job of humanizing her story and this character, and you both do such a wonderful job. Let's have another round of applause. Lawrence Shou. Thank you guys so much. You guys can remain seated for 1 second so they can exit, and then, but thank you guys so much.